Welcome to Evidence, the case for NASA's UFOs. Hi, my name is David Sereda. Throughout the 1990s, a program manager of a cable TV station named Martin Stubbs recorded over 400 hours of live NASA broadcasts. During these broadcasts, there were many scenes of what appeared to be UFOs. In about 1997, a photographer friend of mine named Mike Boyle, who knew Martin Stubbs and knew about the footage, approached me and asked me to conduct an investigation into the scientific community. What you're about to see may be the most powerful case yet to prove that we have actually made contact with an extraterrestrial civilization. I thought if I sent Edgar Mitchell the tether footage from STS-75 that he could clearly see that we were looking at the largest UFOs ever captured on film. I wrote Apollo 14 astronaut Dr. Edgar Mitchell in October of 1999. On November 24th, 1999, Edgar Mitchell wrote me the following letter. David Sereda, yes, I have received your film and reviewed it and the info package you provided. I see utterly nothing about the Tether Incident that is particularly interesting. If there is more revealing footage, then I will look at it. However, I have looked at many feet of space film and have yet to see only one that has anything worth looking into regarding UFO appearances. Signed, Edgar Mitchell. I cannot accept the idea that such a great proponent of UFOs was so adamantly against the suggestion that these giant circles passing behind the tethered satellite were UFOs. He was shrugging off the most astounding piece of video ever witnessed of UFOs in the history of the space program. I couldn't believe it. Dr. Mitchell, who was an MIT PhD, could not even acknowledge that the discs were clearly going behind the 12-mile length of the tether. He couldn't even see that very simple fact. I think just about any moron can tell the difference between when a disc is going behind this piece of wood and when it's going in front of it. That's in front, that is behind. This is not in front, this is behind. And that's exactly how they appear. Why couldn't Edgar Mitchell see this point? I decided to try to argue the points with Mitchell more precisely. He wrote me back almost immediately. David, at first glance they are just particles, perhaps outgassed. I do not know. But I certainly would look for a more prosaic explanation than UFOs. If you have a better film, I will look at it, but I am not very optimistic that they are anything exotic. Signed, Edgar Mitchell. Edgar Mitchell wrote to me that he thought the objects were just particles, perhaps outgassed from the space shuttle. How does a particle appear to be visible from over 77 miles away? We're looking, the cameras on the space shuttle are at least 77 miles away and drifting past 100 miles. How do you see just little particles of dust floating by that appear as perfect, giant circles with notches cut out of the side, clearly passing behind the tether, pulsing with very sophisticated wave patterns? How do particles behave like this? Maybe I have to relearn and reinvestigate particle theory to understand some of these ideas, these ridiculous ideas that some of these scientists are coming up with. He wrote me back the following letter on December 3rd, 1999. David Sereda, I remain open-minded, but I saw nothing on the tape you sent that had sharply defined edges in the vicinity of or passing behind the tether. Also in the footage of the tether, the commentator on the spacecraft is making a running commentary. For really anything of significance in space around the tether at that time, don't you think they would have been saying something about it? If they were as big as you say, they would have been visible to the naked eye and surely reported, not ignored as seems to be the case. You comment about no infrared images. Of course not. If nothing is there, how could there be an infrared image? Signed, Edgar Mitchell. The first point that Dr. Mitchell makes here is that I saw nothing on the tape that had sharply defined edges in the vicinity of or passing behind the tether, reveals that he is ignoring just how defined the edges of these huge discs are and how sharply defined they are as they travel behind the very clear edges of the tether. More precisely about the tether, we remember the Huntsville, Alabama NASA operator asking the crew,
and how wide does that tether appear to be? It seems to resemble a a much wider strand than we'd expect. Can you describe which way the satellite is visible on that strand?
The 12-mile-long tether cable was only a tenth of a centimeter in thickness and should not have been visible from over 77 miles away. There was no answer to why it appeared so thick because the shuttle astronauts did not know the answer then. But on Wednesday, February 28, 1996, of the NASA STS-75 Day 7 highlights, they recorded the very reasons as the scientists report that they can measure sunlight-induced electrical charge on the tether and satellite as it moves through the daylight and night portions of its orbit around the Earth. Because the tether was charged with energy constantly by the highly charged particles in space and from the ionosphere, it produced a magnetic field around it which became sunlit and very visible. But also the report revealed that nitrogen gas from the satellite had been emptied and the gas would have become ionized, which could have produced a neon tube-like effect. This all explained precisely why the tether appeared so thick from so far away. It had nothing to do with the glare or out-of-focus theories.
Claude is trying to do a quick, good job here adjusting the cameras.
Copy that.
Satellite now 100 nautical miles.
Charlie, completely unzoomed, and you see the full extent of the tether. I tried to adjust the focus, but I can't get better than that.
Okay, Claude. Thank you.
I'm going to zoom in now.
So precisely, the UFOs can be seen passing behind the thickness of the tether's sunlight-induced electrical charge and ionized gas. The light shining off of the tether and the energized field obscures the light shining from the UFOs precisely because the UFOs are passing behind the tethered satellite. These are all facts that Dr. Mitchell was unaware of.
This view showing the satellite.
Dr. Mitchell was obviously not considering the NASA astronauts talking about the UFOs on alternate Department of Defense encrypted radio channels, probably because they did not have them during his own Apollo 14 mission to the moon. During long pauses between words, we might assume that the astronauts and NASA control operators are talking on Department of Defense secure channels encrypted to prevent anyone from tapping into their conversations about classified information, such as unidentified flying objects. When Dr. Mitchell finished by saying, "You comment on no infrared image," of course not. If nothing is there, how could there be an infrared image? Dr. Mitchell was obviously completely unaware of how objects that are vibrating with electromagnetic energy higher in frequency than the human eye can see, such as the near ultraviolet range of light, can actually exist but be undetectable in the visible and infrared ranges of light. Perhaps such observations required advanced ideas in quantum physics that he was not prepared to accept at the time. On February 18, 1999, I received the following letter from Dr. Joseph Knuth III. Dear Mr. Sereda, I did look carefully at the video you sent, and I really must apologize to you for not replying sooner. The objects that were on the video appear to me to be floating debris from the cargo bay of the space shuttle. These objects often appeared to be fuzzy because they got quite close to the camera and were often out of focus. End quote. The test that you just saw, I showed a video camera here on a tripod, and I held a set of keys only 4 or 5 inches away from the camera, and you could see that they were very in focus. In the background, somewhere around 100 feet away, was the tree that you saw. The point that Dr. Knuth makes about the video cameras on the space shuttle, that objects as they got close to the camera appeared very fuzzy and became out of focus, and some disappearing altogether, doesn't seem to really hold up here, because video cameras don't actually work the same way optical cameras do. A regular 35mm camera, as you're focused on a distant object, as objects come close to the camera, they get very fuzzy. In fact, they can disappear altogether. But it's not the case with video cameras that have CCD imaging chips inside of them that actually process the images in a very different way than 35mm cameras do. We have to assume, and from studies I've made into the video cameras used on the space shuttle, that they're very high-tech, very high-quality cameras. Many of them are off-the-shelf cameras, but they're retrofitted with more advanced chips inside of them and also image intensifiers and special filters.